Welcome, Gunrunner.
About 8 months ago, I did a video looking at 10 amazing exclusives for the Sharp X68000 computer, and in that episode I mentioned how hard it was to actually find genuine exclusive games for the system, and the ridiculous amount of research that went into compiling my final list. Well, I decided it was high time I made a video for the Sharp X68000's great rival, the Fujitsu FM Towns, and found the task even harder. Like before, I found the lack of English language information frustrating, but even more so due to the increased obscurity of the FM Towns range, and I also had the same issue in terms of most Japanese computer games being multi-format. The amount of googling and cross-referencing I had to do to make this video happen was simply insane. That said, I got there in the end and just about managed to scrape together a list of 10 games worth covering. But because it was so damn difficult to find exclusives in the first place, you'll find this episode a lot less diverse than other ones, with quite a few repeated genres. But I still think there are plenty of games of interest here, and I hope you'll find it fascinating, with a good mix of more well-known titles, combined with some seriously obscure stuff you've probably never seen before. Now, I'm not going to go into the history of the awesome looking 32-bit Fujitsu Towns computer in this intro, or indeed its console-based sibling, the FM Towns Marty, because I've already done standalone amazing facts videos on both of them, that cover this part off very comprehensively. So go check them out if you want to know more. I've linked them both down in the description. Now, with all that important context out the way, it's time to get on with the show as I proudly present 10 amazing Fujitsu FM Towns exclusives. I'm going to start with this one because it's by far the most well known and most celebrated FM Towns exclusive, and it's also the sequel to the original Shooting Towns, which is also exclusive to the 32-bit Fujitsu Micro. Super Shooting Towns is a pretty standard arcade style horizontally scrolling shooter where you control a flying mechanical bug-like ship as it fights its way through various levels populated by some strange insect-like creatures. As you go on, you can of course collect power-ups that not only enhance your regular weapon, but also add extra bolt-ons to increase your firepower. I know what you're saying, this doesn't sound too amazing so far, and actually sounds much like any other horizontally scrolling shooter. But there is one feature that really sets the game apart from the competition, and that's the absolutely awesome level editor. This included utility that lets you design your own stages, as well as customise the existing enemies, and it's possible to both draw new maps as well as change the parameters of the various enemies, which affects the difficulty of each stage. You'll spend hours and hours on this part of the game alone. It's a bit like the old shoot 'em up construction kit that was released for the Commodore 64. Super Shooting Towns is a great looking game with a much underrated Japanese computer that everyone should check out. Not to be confused with about a billion other games that seem to use the name Evolution, this game by System Seicom It's an FM Towns exclusive that will play on the original unexpanded hardware setup, making it very impressive indeed. The game can best be described as a first-person 3D shooter that would initially give the impression of just another Doom rip-off, as it has quite a similar look, but you soon find out that it's something quite different indeed. Evolution is set in a rather abstract and futuristic environment where you play as an ever-evolving creature who must survive an onslaught of other organisms who want to wipe you out. What is especially unusual about the gameplay here is that your forward movement is automatic, like an on-rails shooter, but the player can move up, down and to the sides to avoid and shoot those enemies, rather than using a crosshair. You will also be required to move into the right positions to take in different routes through the game and avoid potential hazards. The look of the game actually reminded me a lot of the tunnel sequences for the amazing Sega arcade game Galaxy Force 2, and the engine here is silky smooth. As well as great visuals, there's also some very atmospheric music and good sound effects too. It's certainly not an easy game by any stretch, but Evolution is certainly a pretty unique experience all round. I know what you're saying, Ultima Trilogy isn't an FM Towns exclusive. It was released for lots of other machines and isn't even a standalone game. It's just a compilation of the first 3 Ultima titles that formed the Age of Darkness trilogy. And if you did shout that at the screen, you were partly right, but not completely, because the FM Towns version of the Ultima Trilogy is actually unique to the system. You see, the 32-bit Fujitsu Micro never actually got standalone releases of the first 3 games like other computers of the era, and only got this set. And rather than just port the PC versions across to the FM Towns, as you probably expect, Origin Systems actually chose to totally remaster them in the style of Ultima 4. So we have greatly improved 2D map graphics, as well as lots of new 3D dungeon sequences and some absolutely gorgeous cutscenes too. There were also upgrades to things like the interface, setup screens and info boxes, which perhaps aren't as noticeable, but that's not all. There are also loads of tweaks to the gameplay too, that include improvements to the combat system, character interactions, and seamless transitions between the 3 titles. And the final icing on the cake is the amazing new CD soundtrack, with all of this adding up to provide the best Ultima experience out there for any home computer of the era. Now, the eagle-eyed DOS gamers amongst you might be looking at this game and thinking that it looks a lot like Metal and Lace Battle of the Robo-Babes, a one-on-one fighting game released by Forest in 1992, has a somewhat cult status in the present day for its risque themes. Well, Doll Using is in fact the sequel to that game, and was released exclusively for the FM Towns the following year. The gameplay is much the same here, scantily clad ladies fighting against robots in a series of Street Fighter 2 style battles. However, certain aspects of the game have been tweaked and improved, including the number of fighters and moves on offer. The plot, if you wondered, is absolutely ludicrous, and something about you being forced to fight robotic fighting machines for entertainment to clear a debt that you owe. Win the fights, you get paid, and then this money can be used to fight tougher combatants and level up your character. The moves are pretty standard things like spinning kicks and fireballs, and everything has a quite futuristic look to it. There are several player modes, including your usual 2-player battle and a cool story mode that features some semi-pornographic cutscenes. Visually, the game is really nice, there's some great music, and it's easy to play, if a bit on the tough side. If you like anime and you like one-on-one fighters, then you'll love doll using. Now, I have to confess that I've massively cheated to put this one in here, but I felt like I just had to have it in the video, because I'm sure that most of you know that Truxton 2, also known as Tatsujin O, was a 1992 arcade shoot 'em up by Toaplan. However, this is the only home port of the game, which is pretty surprising as there are numerous versions of the first Truxton game, so outside of MAME or a real Truxton 2 cabinet, this is the only way to play it. Like the first game, which I owned for the Mega Drive back in the day and absolutely loved, this is a rock-hard vertically scrolling shoot-em-up with mega power-ups, huge bosses, and a pretty regular space-based alien invasion theme. Like a lot of similar titles, this uses a colour-based power-up system. You have to keep grabbing the same type or your powers are reset, as well as other regular pickups like extra speed, lives and bombs. There is also a simultaneous 2-player co-op mode, which always goes down well in games like this too. Okay, so there's absolutely nothing new or original about Truxton 2. It's very much just more of the same, but when it's Toaplan who designed that more of the same, you know that you're in for a treat. There's a reason they're regarded as arcade shoot-em-up connoisseurs. When it comes to arcade ports of the FM Towns, there are a few better than this. Anyone who's familiar with my channel, and indeed my own personal gaming tastes, will be well aware that I'm not a fan of RPG games in general, and often tend to avoid doing videos like this because of that. Much to the dismay of many of my viewers. I've been trying to fix that, and when it comes to looking at games for a Japanese system, it's almost impossible not to include them. We've already had the more Western themed Ultima Trilogy, and now it's time for a proper JRPG, in the form of Abel by Family Soft from 1995, a manga themed affair that will seem very familiar to those with a passion for the source material. Now I must caveat this review by mentioning that a lot of the text in this game is in Japanese, particularly the narration and character dialogue. That does make it somewhat difficult to play, but some parts of it are also in English, so you can kind of get away with it. I was hoping there might be an English translation, and I did come across posts talking about one being worked on, but I couldn't find a ROM for it. The game is set in the late 21st century, where a mysterious huge floating fortress of demons and other beasts emerges from the subspace, and it has a sort of cyberpunk feel to it all. This is one of those RPGs where you'll be required to do a lot of grinding, so be prepared for that, but the graphics and sound in Abel are outstanding, which certainly adds to the appeal. The Japanese sure do love their Mahjong games. Look at the games library for any home computer from the land of the rising sun and you'll find absolutely hundreds of them. The vast majority being completely inaccessible to Western audiences due to the heavy amounts of Japanese text. In fact, when you mention Mahjong to us Westerners, we'll most likely think of Activision Shanghai, which any true connoisseur of the ancient tile game will tell you isn't actually proper Mahjong, and they will refer to it as solitaire. Such games aren't so common in Japan, although Sunsoft did take the game over there and release it for lots of different formats, including the FM Towns. But I was pretty excited to find this rather original version of the concept, which remains a system exclusive. Dragon Shock certainly has a lot of similarities to Shanghai, not just in the game style but also the range of different options on offer, including different game modes, hints, takebacks and tile types. However, the game actually plays slightly different, because there are actually two different types of solitaire Mahjong out there. One where the tiles are stacked in formations, and one where they're laid out in flat on a rectangle on a table. And it's this much lesser seen variation that we have right here. As a lover of Shanghai, I was excited to try Dragon Shock, and I soon found myself getting very addicted indeed. If you like shoot 'em ups, then you'll probably love this list so far because it's pretty heavy on them, and here's another. Originally developed by Satoshi Yoshida, Alltynex was actually developed as an entry for the second annual ASCII Entertainment Software Contest, winning the PC software category. From there, the game was later distributed on a CD that was included with the Japanese home computer magazine Login Softcon, before eventually being published as a freeware title on the developer's website. He later made a version of the game that would work on Windows PCs without the need for an emulator. Over the years, the vertically scrolling Doujin shoot 'em up has built up a bit of a following amongst hardcore shmup fans, and this actually led to the creation of a sequel, which was funded via Kickstarter and released on Steam in 2010. For those who also want to try that out, it's known under the title Alltynex Second. What's even better is that in April last year a new English version of the original FM Towns game was also made available. Although the game is perfectly playable without the English text, it's nice to make sense of the story and all those cutscenes. Alltynex has superb graphics, a great soundtrack, big bosses, loads of great power-ups, and even a co-op 2-player mode too. Like Truxton 2, this is certainly far from original, but you really can't fault the execution. Much like the Ultima Trilogy I already looked at, Genocide Squared isn't strictly speaking an exclusive game, rather a collection of previously published titles that have been enhanced and improved for the FM Towns hardware. This time there are just two games, Genocide and Genocide 2, which were released for all sorts of different systems, including the Super Nintendo, PC Engine and Sharp X68000. For those that have never played either, they are scrolling beat-em-ups set far in the future where a supercomputer has taken over the world and you have to try and stop it. Very Terminator-like indeed. In the game you pilot a mecha who has been sent out to stop the enemy, which includes bosses as well as regular enemies. Alongside the standard levels there are also flying stages to add some variation, and a special droid is also sent out to assist you later on too. Both games have been quite significantly upgraded in this special FM Towns version, but in different ways. In Genocide 1 you can add the droid from the start, the game is now easier, and there are numerous gameplay tweaks. In Genocide 2 there are new enemies and quite a lot of graphical differences. Both games are fantastic, and Genocide Square offers up a ridiculous amount of gameplay that you certainly won't get through in a hurry. This is probably one of the best FM Towns games I've ever played. I mentioned in the intro how hard it was to find genuine FM Towns exclusives, and when I was scouring the lists on the internet I rolled out lots of titles because of who released them, knowing that those companies usually made multi-format games, and Psygnosis was one of those, probably being best known for their many games on the Amiga and PlayStation 1. But it seems I was wrong to do so, because when I needed more games and started checking back, I discovered Megamorph, which was apparently created using the same engine as Microcosm and Novastorm, but unlike those more well-known Psygnosis titles, it was only ever released for the FM Towns. The plot of the game tells us that in the future the remains of a mysterious, highly advanced ancient civilization were discovered in a cave on a deserted planet, and a unique material was found there, which could spontaneously change shape and morph by itself. Humans were able to harvest this amazing technology, but an accident destroyed the source, so the player takes the role of a pilot who must venture to the dangerous areas of space in order to discover additional sources of the rare material. Like the aforementioned games, this uses sprites plonked on top of full motion video and looks very similar to many of those old Laserdisc arcade games where you shoot down enemies and collect the items. Megamorph is both very impressive and very playable too.
Tokyo より遊びが面白い。ニューヨークよりビジネスが面白い。LA より音楽が面白い。声もサウンドもリアルに楽しめるパソコン。富士通 FM タウンズ。これは街より面白い。富士通。
And that rounds up my look at 10 amazing FM Towns exclusives. If you played any of these and want to share your thoughts, or do you have some suggestions of games that I could have included in this list? I also love to hear the thoughts and views of my audience, so please get typing in that comments section. Before I go though, I must thank all of my loyal patrons and YouTube backers for continuing to support my channel and make videos like this possible. However, I must give special thanks to the following people in particular for their much appreciated pledges: Dee Vaughan, Albert Davis, Richard Baker, Martin Wiggins, Peter Grantham, Bernard Santu, Mins, Classic Gamer 74, Josh Hartman, Daniel Skoronsky, Ben P. Stein, Tebby Kitsune, Grady Haynes, Paul Daniel, Seth A. Robinson, Klimatorn, Carl Olsen, Mark Strickland, Carl Cloping, Michael and Electron Star Collapse. If you also want to help support this channel, then you can now join as a member for as little as £2 a month, where you'll get access to exclusive videos and updates and much more besides. Just click the button on my community page to get started. My Patreon is also still available if you prefer to support me in other ways too. I've been the Laird, I thank you for watching and I'll see you all again for another video very soon.